Hey guys, we've had one of our mentorees that's dealt with this issue, and I've wondered if you've dealt with this too. Getting those lovely little comments that kind of go something like this: Hey, we'd love for you to incorporate more hymns in your worship service. Maybe that's a nice way that they put it. Maybe some of them haven't put it that nice. Maybe they put it in more of a um, why aren't you doing more hymns? You should do more hymns, or something of that nature. I'm in a great place where the congregation here loves everything that we do. We do a more modern service that rarely ever incorporates more of what you would consider traditional hymns. And when I say hymns, I'm talking about hymns in the old hymnals. Here's a way that you can approach that. If you're in a situation where maybe some folks are requesting hymns and more and pushing for that, here's a couple things that I would suggest for you. Number one, make sure that you and your senior pastor are on board. Most times that I've seen this come up, there's been a situation where one of a few things happened. You're either new coming into a church and the senior pastor hasn't completely communicated what his vision is for you, and what he really wants music wise. Or it's been a situation where maybe he doesn't know completely what his vision is for the church as far as music goes, and maybe he doesn't completely have his pulse on, or his finger on the pulse of what the community style should be for the church. Is it modern? Is it blended? Is it really traditional? Should it be? Sometimes the senior pastor doesn't completely understand musically where the pulse should be for the church. That's a sad conversation to have, but sometimes the dynamics of the church are that we've been stagnant for a while, and one of the reasons why is because that's where it is, and messages are relevant, and messages are very much to a point to where someone who's in their 20s and 30s can come in and get great relevant teaching. However, the music isn't something that someone who's 20 and 30 can get something out of a song that's um, wrapped up in a hymnal with a lot of Shakespearean language in it. If the congregation is in a community where the median age is 60, 70, and that's who's in the community because it's a retirement community, chances are maybe you need to be doing the hymns, and that's what you need to be locked into, even for a season. Something to consider. Another situation that we run into is when you're new coming into a church and perhaps the lead pastor has wanted to make that change for a while and you've become the scapegoat. It happens. It's a conversation to have. But let's say that we're in a situation where a lead pastor and you are on the same page. We need to make that change. But the congregation, man, they're just not ready for that. How do you make that change? Here's a good way to dive into that and look at how to communicate that in a loving way that really makes a point. A period of worship, whether it's a whole Sunday or a half of a Sunday, sometime that indulges that. There's nothing wrong with that. This past week, we had an entire service that was nothing but songs. And during that time, we probably did 10, 11, 12, I don't know how many songs we did. But the first 3 or 4 songs were nothing but hymns, which is totally outside of our normal culture. We don't do hymns here. Maybe 2 or 3 a year, maybe, that we would ever do. And that would be generous at most. So we did 3 or 4 hymns right off the bat. After which, I talked about the fact that the hymnal, and this is something that most of you guys already know, if you ever look through these things that we used to have called hymnals, and this is something that you can talk about to set it up, if you ever look at something called hymnals, these things we used to have in church, aside from the names of people that wrote the hymns themselves, there was this long list of names that were in hymnals. They were a group of people that were vetted individuals. These people were vetted individuals that had the great honor of being able to vet each song that went into this hymnal. this collection of works that was to go out to each church that would receive this hymnal. It's a great honor to be included in this group of individuals. Can you imagine the weight of responsibility that it took to be able to be a person who judged the theological relevance of each song, whether or not it was honoring of God for each one of these songs? There are so many more songs than what we have in each one of the hymnals. For instance, Fanny Crosby wrote more songs than what are actually in each hymnal. So there are tons of songs that kind of got funneled into each hymnal and more that were left out. There were great songs. It was a great responsibility. Then you can follow that up with a question. Today, since we don't have hymnals anymore, can you guess whose responsibility it is to gauge what songs come into today's church? And then just look at your congregation and remind them, can I just tell you, it's a great responsibility. And it's one that sometimes is an honor and sometimes it's a hard honor to have. Because being totally transparent, each of you have opinions. It's still a great responsibility because we get to choose songs that we have the tough diligence to look at. Is it theologically relevant? Does it serve a great and loving God? But we know that each of us have an opinion about, is it fitting? Some of us have opinions to say that only hymns should be fitting of God. I want us to look at something this morning. Matthew 26. This verse in Matthew is a great verse because it's one that we kind of overlook sometimes. And I want to get the right. I'm going to bring it up here to where I can get the right one. Forgive me. I want to get the right translation up in front of me here. Matthew 26:30 says, "And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives." And that comes from the NIV version. When they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Now that's kind of interesting. Who's they? That was Jesus and the disciples. They sung a hymn. Now do this after you've sung 3 or 4 hymns and ask them, would anyone care to guess which of these hymns that we sung this morning that Jesus and the disciples sang? Of course, they know none of those songs that you would have sung that morning would have been the songs that Jesus and the disciples sang. A quick check of the copyright will tell you that. So it begs to question, what hymn would Jesus and the disciples have sang? Well, we know from history that most likely, since it was during the Passover time, that Jesus and the disciples would have sang one of the Hallels. It comes from the section of the Psalms. More appropriately, they would have sang the great Hallel, which would have been Psalm 136. Psalm 136 says, "Give thanks to the Lord our God is good, his love endures forever." And if you're following along, you know that sounds like an old song that we used to sing in the 90s. Give praise, forever God is. You're like, wait a minute. So Jesus and the disciples sang a Chris Tomlin song? You can use that for a little bit of humor. So if we have the idea that we can only sing hymns, there's not a hymn that matches that song. There is, however, a Chris Tomlin song that matches that song. You see, at some point, if the only songs that glorify God in an appropriate manner are the songs of the hymns, what about the songs that Jesus sang, the hymns that Jesus sang? I want to suggest to you that the hymns that we sing today, the modern songs, are hymns. It's the same picture that we're painting. It's merely a different frame. Now, here's the important thing for you. Just like I did this past week with my church, in honoring my church and those people that really can reflect and look back on the hymns. And hello, it was hard for me not to lead some of these without wanting to get my hand in motion while I'm leading and keeping time, because that's what I grew up doing years and years and years ago. I'm starting to age myself, aren't I? They took me back to a place in time. I brought up a young lady up on the stage to do an offertory piece, and she did an old hymn, and it immediately transported me back. I could sing it in my mind, and it took me back to a place in time. That's what the hymns do for those who recall them. They serve a place. And I know that what I did Sunday did so much a great thing for those that recall the hymns. They serve a place. Don't let that place be forgotten. Next week, a month away, 3 months away, 4 months away, I'm probably not going to do another hymn again. And that's okay. And the people here aren't going to complain, because I've created that culture. Remember, you create the culture that your church has come to expect. Culture is there whether you create it or not. Set the culture and do it lovingly. Love you guys. Have a great and blessed day.